the June jobs report is out. Newsmax correspondent Christina Thompson live in our newsroom with a breakdown of the numbers. Christina?
The June jobs report shows a bigger than expected pickup of 370,000 jobs. But that's a problem for inflation hawks in the Federal Reserve, which meets at the end of this month. The Fed knows that a bigger interest rate hike would take a bigger chunk out of economic growth. That's to cool inflation. Now, important to note, the economy is still a few 100,000 jobs short of pre-pandemic levels. There are many more jobs available than workers who are willing to take them. The labor crisis has been going on for months now. It's a storm of problems brewing, all of which seem at odds with each other. Robust jobs growth, soaring inflation, but a first quarter GDP already showing decline. So here's how folks on the street see it all shaping up.
Do you think that we're already in a recession?
It's coming. I think we're probably in worse than a recession.
Everything's up, right? Nobody has money. Gas up.
Yeah, I don't think everything is back to normal, 100%.
The prices are up. People aren't working.
You really can't find the workers.
I mean, I've been working the whole time, but I don't think a lot of people want to do the full week thing yet.
The labor market, where demand for workers far outpaces unemployed people looking for work, has held up stronger than the rest of the economy, which is rapidly cooling. Also notable, the June report shows wages are up 5%, but that's still below the more than 8% inflation rate. So those increased paychecks still aren't enough to keep up with the higher prices of groceries and everyday necessities. So consumers are starting to pull back on spending, partly because of this inflation, which is running at a 4-decade high. Home construction is showing as the Federal Reserve attempts to pull down inflation through aggressive interest rate hikes. Manufacturing production is declining as Americans are reluctant to buy big-ticket items and household goods. And the attention turns to next week's measure of consumer-level inflation. That's when the June CPI comes out on Wednesday. Back to you.
All right, we'll be watching for it. Christina Thompson, thank you so much. Joining us now to break down those numbers, Newsmax business and legal analyst Perry Kalajian. Perry, thanks so much for coming in studio to talk about this jobs report. Again, higher than expected. So what do you make of it?
Well, not entirely unexpected, simply gaining back a lot of the jobs that were lost early in the pandemic. It's not a net gain, though, and it's not so surprising. If you look at Fed policy over the last 2.5 years, they pumped a lot of money into the economy, kept interest rates low, and that would spur job growth. That was also accentuated by President Biden's policy of spending more. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan contributed to that. Basically, it wasn't needed. There was money in the system. So he did that for purposes of payback to his political allies. And then he doubled down on spending by the $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan, which on its surface sounds great, but 25% of that roughly was infrastructure, and the other 75% went again to his special interest projects and supporters.
There was a lot of money that was going into the economy.
Yes.
And now we are facing 40-year high inflation. In Christina's report, she was pointing out, too, that you might see a wage increase, but it's still not enough to deal with just how much everything costs.
No, I think that's true. I think we also ought to look at some of the reasons for this inflation, and I think it's to a great extent energy-driven. If you look at the current market, you have China, for instance, that's building coal-fired plants. You have Germany on coal-fired plants pivoting there, LNG pipelines in Europe. What is President Biden doing? Well, he's got his war on energy and going to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and other hostile actors, begging them to produce more oil. This all impacts the economy because energy permeates throughout the economy. It has a multiplication effect. It affects everything.
What about the Federal Reserve? We've seen them hike interest rates. Do you think another one's coming?
I would say yes, but I think a lot of this is too long in coming. As I said, they pumped a lot of money into this economy early on, kept interest rates low, and they did it for far too long, well into 2022. I think they should have probably come off that position in the middle of 2021, if not sooner. They didn't. I think one of the reasons might have been that Fed Chairman Powell was lobbying President Biden to keep his position, which he did, but possibly to the detriment of our economy and inflation.
I want to show you recent polling because I'm always curious, of course, how Americans are viewing the economy, right? We get a lot of talking heads who are going on TV and talking, but then you get this idea here. And the question posed was, have actions of the federal government over the past 6 months helped, hurt, or had no impact on the economy? And the vast majority saying that 57% it hurts them and the economy. So that's the response there. Although the White House paired that with what we heard recently from the press secretary, that it's the strongest economy in U.S. history.
Well, I think that's more of a soundbite. If you look at the Atlanta Federal Reserve earlier this week and other parties, they indicated that we are entering, or we have already experienced, 2 quarters now of negative growth in the economy. So if you take that and put that on top of comments that had been made in other parts of the economy, that kind of gets us to the idea that we're in a recession or right on the cusp of a recession. I mean, we can look at things like Federal Reserve Chairman Powell's comments favoring inflation over recession, the spending of President Biden, increased fuel costs, increased food costs, a downward turn in the stock market, as well as layoffs. And either we're in a recession or we're on the cusp of a recession.
Yeah, and that's what you hear from those New Yorkers that Christina was able to speak to. I remember, too, we heard inflation was transitory, and yet it's been with us for months. Perry Kalajian taking the time and joining us this morning. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.